Hi, my name is Dr. Cofield, Jim Cofield. I'm a psychologist and I'm also on the board of Renew Clinic. No one wakes up when they're 12 years old and says, you know, when I grew up, I'd like to be an addict. I'd like to be on the street. I'd like to be desperate. I'd like to sell everything I have for a drug, and I'd like to lose all my relationships and have no one respect me. No one starts out that way. All of us are made in the image of God and we're created to worship. And addiction is ultimately a worship of the wrong thing, a worship of something that will falsely give you relief in a fallen world. At some level, addiction is a refusal to struggle, a refusal to sorrow in a fallen world. It's amazing that in addiction, the very thing you came to for relief becomes the battle of your life. I'm delighted to invite you to spend the next few minutes listening to the stories of people that have hope, that have courage. And as you watch these incredibly brave souls talk about their lives, remember, they're not any different from you or I. So when you listen to their stories, listen for faith. Faith is the reality that your past can't destroy your future if you belong to Christ. And hope is the idea that your future is in His hands. And so listen with a curiosity for the renewed faith and the engaging hope that you'll hear in these stories.
I started using when I was 12. I liked the way it made me feel, and I wanted more. I wanted more of it.
Started drinking when I was 12 years old, and by the age of 15 I was in my first treatment program.
I started getting into cocaine and ecstasy at about 14, and you know, the brain is still developing at that age. When I see 14-year-olds now, I mean, they're still children.
So I'd already been dabbling in drugs from 16 to 19, but when I was 19 I got hurt, and a doctor throughout those surgeries had prescribed me Percocets. After being on Percocets for about 4 months and coming off of them, not knowing that the sickness I was experiencing was actually withdrawals, I began to use more. I started to find them on the streets, and that started a really long battle with opioid pain pills.
When your brain is still developing, patterns can become very deeply ingrained. And so when people use substances to help them cope, in so many ways their normal development, emotionally speaking, stops. And they find themselves, when they do sober up, kind of emotionally 15 or 14 or 16 or 17.
I ended up going to UT for a little while and thought, man, alcohol feels a lot better than what's going on in my head.
A lot of things I kind of melted down into turmoil. I found my way back onto drugs.
Over the last few years, alcohol seemed to have taken control over my life.
I was hurting myself, well, really killing myself, and hurting my family. But I just denied it.
You know, I hid that from my wife and hid it for 7 months. And of course, when she found out, this had been multiple times that throughout my marriage I'd hid the fact that I was wrestling with my addiction.
It was interfering with my family life, my work life, and a lot of relationships of friends and family.
My mom didn't know what to do with me, and she was afraid for me. I had an abortion by the time I was 15 years old. She sent me to various group homes, and I went to a children's home in Thomasville, North Carolina, ran away from there.
Addiction, by definition, will create incredible problems with relationships. When can I get this substance again? Where will it be? Will it be at this place or this place? Will I have enough money or resources to get these opiates? When you're preoccupied with all those things, you're not present with the people that you're supposed to love.
I truly just believed that there's no point in following the rules. What's the point in rules? You know, I'm gonna live how I wanna live.
And instead of saying or asking for help, I decided a move to Colorado would be my fix. So I moved out to Colorado.
After a little bit, moved to Tennessee. I thought that would be best for me, and the drinking and the drugs also followed here.
And instead of my drinking ceasing, it got dramatically worse.
The drinking and the drugs continued to where I attempted suicide and then stayed in a mental hospital for a while.
And within a period of 7 or 8 months, I started using other drugs I had never touched before, and within that time frame had almost entirely ruined my life.
I ended up getting 2 more DUIs, fired from that paralegal job, and moving back home with my parents at the time. I had labeled myself with, "You're always going to be like this, Danielle. This will always be your fate. You're going to die from this."
Lately things were getting bad, drinking heavily a lot, using cocaine, to where I was about to attempt suicide again.
I needed to do something different, but really didn't know how.
I had just gotten out of jail and on the road to recovery, but not really knowing where I was going.
Well, once it turns on you, once what you went to for comfort becomes your enemy, it is a desperate place.
I didn't think living without alcohol was possible. So this was my last stint. I had gotten caught with alcohol in my parents' house.
And I kept going and I kept going all the way into a heroin overdose that left me on life support for 5 days.
And I thought the only way out from this life was to slit my wrists. And so I did. But God entered into that picture again. My fear was going to God and being met with anger and disgust. But I was met with grace and love.
You know, for me, I was like, I'm just done. I'm really wanting to put this in my past. I don't want this to be something that lingers and affects the rest of my life.
Because we are image bearers of God, there's a point in our desperation where we know we're made for more. And often that is when God finds us. When we're at a place where we know that there's something better, there's something more, there's a relationship with the one who created you.
It was a prison ministry of these women that came in to tell us about Christ. I had this encounter with the Lord that forever changed the trajectory of my life. It changed my affections. It changed what I believed about who I am, who He is.
The internal medicine physician walked into the room and he just looked at me and he said, "Kid, you're a miracle." He said, we don't quite understand how you made it, because when you arrived at the hospital, you were dead. This had been an intervention from God, and I became a believer in the hospital.
It seems like the darkest place in someone's life when they're caught or when they come to the end of their options. But really, it's a severe mercy of God, because it's often in that moment that someone begins to see the place where they were made to worship.
Luckily, a friend suggested Renew Clinic.
I heard about Renew Clinic in 3 different ways within a week's time, and they prayed with me every day from the day I started, every day of my journey till the day I graduated.
And I started to believe that He loved me, even in that dark pit of disgust. He knew that I could be a different person, and He showed me how to do that. God's will for me is not to be an addict or an alcoholic. That was something really, it took me a long time to grasp. I realized I'm loved regardless.
I didn't know much about the Bible. I didn't know much about anything except that Jesus is Lord. And that's about all I knew.
I went back to treatment again, except this time I went to a Christ-centered treatment center. I started to believe that there is a God that loves me.
I know if it had been left up to me, I could not have done it by myself.
Yeah, had it not been for Renew, I don't know where my marriage would be or where I would be right now.
And I can't imagine being able to get where I'm at right now in a different environment.
The counselors here, they're just wonderful. They don't shame you. They treat you with love and compassion, but with accountability. And you have to work for it.
It didn't take a few minutes to realize how great it was and how comforting it is to just be able to hear it talk and not worry about being judged. And
you know, going into Renew, there was just an overwhelming sense of just compassion and grace that I was met with, and love and understanding. And that for me was really a key part, an element for me to get healed. And what I loved about the approach at Renew was really, it was Christ-centered, and it was all about taking you back to the power of what God can do in your life and letting that be the breakthrough.
Today I can say that I don't have to have a drink of alcohol. I'm free from that chain. And I want to help others know that they can be free from those chains too.
I'm here today. I'm married for 12 years now to my husband Jonathan. I have 3 children, and directing a ministry and still clinging to him for guidance.
I have 3 beautiful children now. I have a beautiful wife. We've been married for 2 years. I'm sober, and now I get to share this story with other addicts.
What's beautiful from a Christian perspective of life is that nothing's wasted. My sorrows aren't wasted. It says in Revelations that God collects my tears. And that includes my struggle with my idolatry and my addictions. Those aren't wasted. Redemption is realizing that God doesn't end the story in the sorrow. And the story doesn't end in the destruction. It ends with hope.
Everything's changed. My walk with the Lord has changed. How I see myself and how I see the world around me has changed.
And I'm thankful that Renew was a place I could go and just be poured into.
And it's just been a blessing to me and my family, and helped me remember that I was exactly where God wanted me to be all along.
Believe me, addiction can happen to anyone. No one's immune from an addiction, whether it's alcohol, substance abuse, sexual integrity, you name it, codependency. None of us are immune from those problems of life. Therefore, I strongly encourage anyone who's dealing with some of the brokenness, shame, guilt, as well as the great deceiver making us believe that we're not worthy of being better people. I strongly encourage you to come to Renew.
If you want recovery, this is the place to be. I really believe that.
So if you haven't been able to tell already, 3 of these testimonies have been from staff members right here at Renew Clinic. And one thing that sets us apart is we are Christ-centered. All of us have been touched by the powerful working of Jesus on our behalf.
What's interesting in our short history at Renew Clinic is that when people graduate, they don't want to leave. And that's because part of what's created in the treatment program there is a community of people. I think in 5 years, maybe 10, there's going to be a community of graduates from Renew Clinic that still get together, that become a resource to their church, a resource to their family, a resource to this community.
Jesus has plucked us and set us on a rock to proclaim the good news to those who are just like us. And we're here not to say that we've arrived to anything and have all the answers, but to be a living testimony to people walking through our doors who may feel hopeless, who may think they're beyond God's reach, who may be filled with shame and grief and all the things that we are so familiar with, who may be believing lies or stuck in despair, ringing with anxiety. I mean, there's so many things that we can all say we experientially understand. And we want to be here to help walk our participants through what the Lord has walked us through. We're seeing God working through this place. He is the one that is changing lives. We're just simply creating space for Him to work. And so we are continuing to see God bless this place. It's not because we know it all or have all the answers, but because we are simply providing a place for the Lord to come in and change lives.
In a world that's looking for heroes, looking for good, compelling stories, you've just watched some. You've watched people who, gosh, a few years ago, most wouldn't have bet on any chance for them living productive lives. But instead, you've listened to their stories and you've seen the look in their eyes as they talk about their faith in Christ and their sobriety and their new hope. I hope it's encouraged you to believe again that the gospel's not theoretical, it's practical and it's life-changing.